All right, welcome to the Better Than Me podcast with John Conover. And this podcast, for those of you that have been tuning in, is an opportunity for me to learn right alongside of you. I like to interview guests on here that have business success stories. And here I am taking notes, learning from some of the best in my network, some of the best friends that I have that I get to call friends that are in business. And those of you that listen in, you're learning on different topics that can touch business, but also possibly bleed over and touch the different areas of your personal life. And today is a prime example of that. And so I get to have the privilege of having Dr. Bill Moss on as a guest today. He is the owner of Keystone Specific Chiropractic Center and the center at Keystone. And Bill, thank you so much for being on today. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited for this discussion and conversation today.
This all started about 2 weeks ago from a guest that I've had on here a few episodes back, Justin Shank. And I was hanging out with Justin as a mutual friend of ours, and he brought your name up. And then it was regarding this topic we're going to get into right at the end, about spiritual empowerment and the way energy tends to flow through us as humans. And this topic comes up, and I haven't seen you in years. And the next morning, we bump into each other at the same coffee shop, and then we grab lunch and we have this conversation. And I was like, oh my goodness, the Better Than Me podcast, this is what it's all about. And that's kind of how this all came to be. I think our audience would love to hear maybe some of your story. You're in the chiropractic world, but you've also now branched out into some other things. I want to hear your story as well. If you want to start maybe at the beginning.
Yeah, it's funny. I had this flashback during the introduction of actually all the moments that we have kind of worked together over the years in multiple business facets. So I started my practice. I don't know what year did you go into your business, John?
2012.
Okay.
And then we bumped into each other, about 2 years later.
So that's when I went into practice, was 2012. And then I moved back to the local area, and we ran into each other in 2014. But you may or may not remember, I came and did a marketing presentation with your associates. Yep. And then we did a men's group. So it's been you've been along almost the parallel journey of me growing my business and now businesses. So, I look at my life now and I see so many things that I have done as preparation for kind of who I am now. And a little bit about my background, I actually started in high school education. I was a high school emotional support special education teacher before I even decided to become a chiropractor, which is very interesting now because the three careers, if you will, were education, chiropractic, and then I also do teaching and healing work in addition. So I feel like all of the steps along my journey helped prepare me to do what I'm doing now. And it feels like that's definitely part of my purpose and what I'm to be doing. So when I look back at my adventure, if you will, some people were like, wow, you were a teacher? What's that got to do with anything? And I was like, it has everything to do with everything. Being a teacher, working in a school, it gave me such a sense of the whole system, if you will, from working with lawyers to doctors to counselors and just other general education teachers. So
you know what's interesting, Bill? Sorry, it's now I'm going, okay, now my wheels are turning. I had my degree in history education.
Okay.
So now, and I think this is part of the story about, part of your story that I didn't know, that you came from that education background. But I think one of the biggest things with education is learning. It's learning how people learn is part of that process, and learning how to communicate, and not a bad skill set to have. Very interesting part of your story. So you're in the education world.
Yeah. And actually, I joke that every single person that's working for me right now is an ex-educator. So they tend to get really good skills that translate to many different areas. But I was a little similar to the type of student that I was actually teaching. And I wasn't in special education, but at the same time, I developed debilitating panic attacks when I was going into my student teaching, to the point that I was actually hospitalized in the emergency room, They looked at my heart rate, blood pressure, respiratory rate, all that stuff. It was elevated. I wasn't on drugs. Nobody knew what was going on. I got sent to every doctor around the sun, cardiologist, ear, nose, and throat, neurologist. And basically through MRIs, EKGs, EEGs, every test with an acronym in it, they came back and were like, "You're anxious." And I was like, "Okay, but I'm really suffering." So I did the whole medical route for an entire year where I was on an antidepressant, anti-anxiety drug. And at the conclusion, I was like running out of my prescription and I was procrastinating and I never got it filled and I woke up in pain. And this time when I woke up in pain, I went to see a chiropractor very close to where I was teaching. And I told the gentleman my story about my health over the years. And I had also had a favorable experience with chiropractic while I was suffering with the anxiety. Like when I got adjusted a couple times, not regularly, just like here and there, I felt less anxious. And I didn't say that to anybody. I didn't like make the connection, if you will. And this gentleman was kind of like, "Listen, I think if we do some regular care, you're going to have a different experience because your body's out of balance." I'm just going to keep it that simple because people are like, "Anxiety, chiropractic, how's it related?" It's related through the nervous system, if you will, which is a very important system. But my body started to regulate. I got under regular care, and in 6 months' time, my anxiety was gone. I didn't have pain. My allergies had cleared up. I was breathing better. And I was a competitive runner and competitive marathon runner at this time. I took like 7 minutes off of my already fast time. Like I was just like, this stuff's great, whatever, you know, and the stuff was me. It was my ability to heal, adapt, grow, and improve.
So I want the audience to park on this for a second and digest what you just said, because what you do on the back end on the additional, but it's all related. Yeah. It's all related. Yeah. People think of it as two separate fields, but it's all related. And I actually have to tell the audience, I went and saw you for about 18 months. I had sciatic nerve pain from driving a ridiculous amount of hours in my car.
That's right. Yeah.
And when you told me the body is powerful and can heal itself,
yeah,
I went, never heard that from a doctor before. Like,
yeah. Well, it's like the reality is, and we get into the thick of it, is like that's what a surgeon relies on too. You know, the same idea. A surgeon's like, and this is where, you know, emergency medicine, this isn't a medical versus chiropractic, but, you know, if you come in with an emergency, they're actually not focused on how you feel, really. They're interested in like getting the problem fixed and taking care of it. So it's not like, "Oh, do you have a symptom here, there?" If you show up and you have an emergency, they're like, "How do we keep this person alive? And how do we just do our job?" So the focus comes into like, we got to do our job and then the body's going to take care of itself. So like if there's a broken bone, it's not like they set it, they may cast it, and then they leave it alone with the expectation that it's going to heal. So there's so many millions and millions of complicated processes that occur with a person that, you know, we don't have to consciously be aware of, but it's happening. So like the healing always happens in that individual. And most of the time symptoms are actually the body giving the person an awareness that something's going on, right? Like maybe we need to take a look at something. So my body was doing that very out of control. And I needed to start taking control. And you know, a lot of times when people are holistic, right, or healthy, or, you know, not using lots of drugs and medicine or traditional means, people theorize that they were always that way. And I wasn't at all. I was like the type of person that was like, well, give me a pill, potion, or lotion to just help me feel better in the moment and move on. And my wife was one of the people that was like, when I was on the anxiety med, she was like, "Don't think that this is going to solve your problem." And I'll never forget that. I remember like where I was, where we were driving to. I remember like being like, wow, that stayed with me forever. Like the idea that this is going to solve all your problems, it was redirected in that moment. And then I was like, well, if I'm going to also, if I can be my own problem, I can be my own solution. So I saw my life transform over 6 or 7 months, and I got really curious. That's what happened. You know, some people are like, "No, I don't believe in what X, Y, and Z." I was curious. I was like, how'd I go from this state of dysfunction, worry, fear, unknown, to this point of like, I trust that I can heal through a cold. I don't need to run to medication for every single thing. And like, I started to shift into this, at first trust, but then knowingness of like, okay, I can be more responsible for myself. And that led to a simple conversation, which I'm sure we've all had moments where my chiropractor during a routine visit, he was like, "You ask a lot of great questions. Have you ever considered doing this for a living?" And I was like, "No way. I've never considered it." But then I walked away and I just couldn't stop thinking about it. And I brought it up to my wife. Then we were married for like 6 months, right? And I'm like, "Hey, my chiropractor thought I might be good at this." And she's like, "That's cool." And then I brought it up again and she's like, you're talking to me like I'm your dad. Do you want to do this? And I was like, I do want to do this. So, and that kind of set off my journey to like discovering, myself as a chiropractor. And, the rest is history, I guess you could say, but that was the inspiration or the catalyst for me to like pursue a career in which I'm doing right now. Yep.
So, one of the things you just brought up that I think is worth talking about, because this could be a concept that would, this would translate into anything, any area, that the drug or the medicine is not going to solve the problem. And so many times we think the problem is this, but that's a symptom. The problem is rooted much deeper. That could be an analogy for business or life in general. And that might not just be health related. People look at the symptoms of their life and the results they're getting, and they want that Band-Aid, they want that quick fix, or they want to mask it or hide it, or get rid of the consequence or the pain. Yeah. And there's something, and what you discovered was, for long-term health, I need to identify the actual problem and treat the actual problem. I know when I went to see you, you did a nerve scan on me, and you didn't adjust my hip where my sciatic nerve was, right? You didn't adjust my hip. You didn't adjust my back. You did a nerve scan. You said, well, this is where your body is out of alignment, and it's caught. And if your body will get into alignment, your body has a better chance of healing itself. And over time, that pain will start to go away on its own. And here I'm popping like ibuprofens every day, every time I got to know how to get in the car. And you're like, no, we got to solve the actual problem. Yeah. Wow. I did a good job like teaching you. You're like saying some things. I'm like, that's a great way to explain this. I mean, because it's really true. And I was having a conversation this morning with one of my clients, and I was talking about the younger generations, like people coming up now. And I said this from the day I got in practice, like the 20 something is amazing to work with, and now that 20 something is 30 something, but even the current younger generation, like they view the world, they've observed the world, and they've seen this idea of like, wow, my parents like gave up the responsibility of their health to an establishment, a doctor or whatever, an authority. And the results that they got, we look at those fruits and we're like, I don't think I like that so much. So maybe I need to do something slightly different. And then in addition to that, with social media, with education, with information, if you will, there's way too many examples of like healthy people going through life and thriving and dealing with their challenges in a healthy way. So it also serves as like an archetype that gives people hope to be like, well, I don't have to just give up my power, my personal health, all that, to just an authority and an establishment. Because when you start thinking and you start looking at the world outside of yourself, like you described, it makes sense that like we all know the body heals, and we all know it's always striving to like keep us in some form of homeostasis or balance, and yet things can interfere and interrupt that profile for an individual. So there's many factors to that too. There's not like a one cause, one cure mentality. And that's where chiropractic can get pinned in this, oh, you think you can cure everything. Well, it's like, I've had people get better with ADHD. I've had people get better with lupus and rheumatoid arthritis. Wow. And I've had people get better with a neck pain, right? All in the same case or different.
but it's like the application of what I'm doing is helping the body work better. And who wouldn't agree? Like, if the body performs better or the human being performs better, they're going to experience less stuff on the most simple level, right?
The perfect segue into what you've decided to do over the last, I guess, year or so. It still comes from the same passion. It still comes from the same mission, even. And so they're related, but you started what's called the Center at Keystone, and call it personal development or an empowerment center, but it's very spiritually focused, but not in a religious way.
Correct.
Maybe talk about what drove you that direction. And first, let me just tell the audience, one of the things that Bill and I talked about last week was one of the things that got in the way for me was an addiction to alcohol, and I decided to give it up. And it's been one of the best decisions I've ever made in my life. But one of the things that I've realized is it was one of those masking things that was masking maybe some pain. It was like a medication. And now it's forcing me to confront a lot of things that maybe I was masking. And it's actually driven me to people like you, Dr. Bill, who are, you're a few steps ahead of me in this journey. That's kind of how I see it. I go, okay, they're a few steps ahead of me. They probably have experienced things that I've experienced. And now when I heard you talking about the center at Keystone and what you're doing there, I went, okay, this is ridiculously cool. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, I like to refer to myself, even in the chiropractic world, as kind of like a purist, in the sense that, like, if you come to my office, I didn't try to sell you supplements. I didn't try to give you physical therapy. I didn't try to, like, oh, you're looking for this? Well, I got this over here. Oh, you're looking for this? I got this. We've all seen like health centers or chiropractors or physical, like that, kind of do that. And I've always enjoyed the purity of the work that I do, and I wanted to keep it that way. And so when you see I have a separate business called the Center at Keystone, part of that is intentional, and to not confuse, like, oh, to be under chiropractic care, you also have to, start walking the path of spiritual development. Like, that's not true. That's, people that want to engage with me in that way, there's an opportunity. But that was never my designed intention. But what I did find is I ended up doing this work because I saw my life shift in many good ways. And I wasn't looking for that. Like, I didn't have this deep desire to be an energetic and spiritual healer, guide, teacher at all. Like, at all. I rejected it, in fact, very, very significantly for a long period of time, and probably fought tooth and nail, like, I don't want to do this. But the idea was, I haven't seen a better way. And what I mean by that is, like, I just had a friend who was a practicing chiropractor as well. He started to do some of this work. He offered a healing session to me called the Life Activation. I trusted him. I decided to do it. And he said things like, Bill, people are going to see the light you have when you speak. You're going to find more of your purpose in this. And I was like, that sounds nice. And I like you. It feels a little weird, but whatever. And I did the session. And afterwards, I felt more like myself than I ever had. And I was a person who struggled with anxiety, right? And then I saw that myself heal and get through that. But once I had this session, I realized how much anxiety I was still managing. I knew how to manage the rest of it and not release it. And I was walking around, and I was wearing masks to fit into the world. And I had learned how to be a chameleon in many ways, and, not bring my full self forward. But after Life Activation, a lot of that started to dissolve a little bit naturally. Relationships that weren't working started to maybe go away. Opportunities started to really open up. And this is around the time I think I started taking care of you, where I was like teaching around the world. I helped establish a practice in another country. I had all these wild opportunities occur very shortly after this healing, but that wasn't the biggest thing for me. Internally, I was starting to feel better about who I was and more natural in many ways. And I just started to walk that path. And I had a couple incidents where, I through this work, I was ready to like leave my wife. I was ready to go do all this stuff. And what this spiritual path, if you will, kind of brought me back to the things that were right in my life that I was trying to run from. And it helped me do it in a way more of myself. And I had done so many like personal development, you know myself type of stuff. And I just never saw anything that worked as well as the spiritual lineage and the path that I started working in, and now am a guide, teacher, and healer within. And I, again, like I said before, if I thought 5 years ago, 6 years ago, I'd be sitting here talking about this and excited about it, I'd be like, you're crazy. But I've seen so much transformation in people that is unexplained. It's like, I don't know, I'm just being more myself, and I like life better. Because at some point, most of the time, people start living other people's lives. And what this work does is it points you back to yourself in an energetic way, not in this like mental way. Because our Western society is good at trying to fix everything through the mind. And what do we know about the mind of society?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Yeah. Not a good gateway. One of the things that, because this podcast is obviously for people that are aspiring entrepreneurs, they're in the process of building a business, and they're looking for tips, ideas, inspiration, because sometimes people are in business for themselves and they feel very by themselves. And so I want people to be in business for themselves, but not by themselves. I want them to feel like there's a community of voices that are speaking belief and truth about the business world. And one of the things that it's occurred to me over the last few years is, it's the saying, how you do anything is how you do everything. And how I show up in life is probably how I'll show up in business. And if there's a deficiency in my business, I could probably look internally and go, there's probably something going on with me. And that was one of the things that stood out to me about our conversation. And from a personal side of things, I have experiential knowledge now about what that dark side can look like, and how it can show up in business. Something you said, though, that I think the audience needs to pay very close attention to, because I think it's the number one killer of the life people want, and it is fear. I 100% believe that fear is the number one killer of the life that you want. And so you said you stopped trying to manage your anxiety and you decided to release it. Okay, that's big. That's huge.
Well, because many people I work with, I'll just leave it at that, wherever they fall on the spectrum of me working with them, is there's a true of like, I need to control that. What can I do? And a lot of times it's just like, you need to get rid of, you need to release. Like when you talked about alcohol, it wasn't like, well, what do I need to add to get rid of this alcohol? It's like, no, you need to get rid of the alcohol. You just need to let that go and be done. And then you can open up. It's like this weight that was like holding you down. And that's part of this idea. And the fear, oftentimes the fear is what shows up when you're going in the right direction. The resistance is the thing that shows up when you're actually going to make change, because something starts to rise up and challenge you and be like, do you really want this? Do you really think that's, that's like almost like the demon that holds us back, is very much when we're going in the right direction, all the fear, anxiety, doubt, worry shows up. And it's like, oh, now through like lots of the work I did, I oftentimes will view that as be like, oh, there's something there that's important. And that's why I'm experiencing this, but it doesn't have to become like internalized. Oh, it's something to be aware of, right? Is like, oh, maybe I'm going in the right direction, because if I let go of this, what would that mean? Like there's an aspect of our negative self that wants to keep us small. It wants to hold us back. And like you're saying is like, entrepreneurs and business people in general get into it to help people, right? In general, like people who have their own business or services, it's like we want to serve ourselves, but we want to serve other people. And it can get kind of crisscrossed at certain times. And then we start to chase other things that are outside of that at once was a desire from the soul or the higher self, if you will, as opposed to the ego. But it very quickly and slowly, it can become I'm chasing this money and just this fame and this success and these other houses and these things. And it's like, well, because you thought those things were going to actually make you feel satisfied and happy and joyful. But the reality is you just started to chase your negative ego and you went far with it. So I see that very often with people who are looking to grow and, grow.
To acknowledge that there is fear about something is a healthy practice. To acknowledge that, okay, that's causing me some fear. To then grab a hold of it, internalize it, and make it part of your physical being. That's where the anxiety comes from. When I was doing some work with a therapist and talking about the difference between fear and anxiety, it was the idea that anxiety was the chemical response in my body to the fear. And it's like, if you're holding on to something, it becomes a part of your DNA.
Totally.
Okay.
Yes.
So acknowledging the fear, but then releasing it and acknowledging that maybe it's there because this is new. Maybe that's the only reason it's there.
Yeah. And if we don't get rid of it, it becomes what we live. Like we start to keep living in that physiology. It's like, are overly emotional people very grounded people? Like, do you want a 13-year-old making big decisions for you in your life, John? Like they tend to be very emotional beings, but like when we don't deal with our emotions and we keep reliving them, we in essence keep doing that. We keep reliving the like what ifs, the anger, the fear, the unresolved emotion over and over again, and it becomes problematic. I used to be a competitive distance runner, and like before a big race, it's natural, it's healthy almost to have a little bit of anxiety before that. But if I let that anxiety consume me about how this is going to be a bad race, I'm not prepared, my fitness really wasn't, of course I'm going to have those things, and yet the gun's going to go off and I'm going to deal with it, right? But if I didn't, and I was like, well, the conditions aren't perfect for today, the sun isn't at the right angle, the temperature is a little warmer than I really want, and then I just let it all derail my progress instead of being like, okay, this is how it is today, and yet I'm still going to go try to do my best. And I think that's where, like, if I don't release that when the gun goes off in that race, like, it's going to hold me back. And that's true in life. It's like, it's okay to acknowledge the fact that, like, you're scared or you're worried or you're fearful or you're not satisfied with where you are. But the problem is when people just keep that and they say, I'm not satisfied where I am. And you're like, okay, well, what are you going to do about that today? Well, I want you to do everything about it for me. Okay, but I believe in you. And then the next day, it's the same thing. So it's like, there's actually ways to shift that energy. There's energetic tools to do it, but also just having awareness. And that's kind of like the name of the game is like, if you want to know yourself to a greater degree, is you need to have some awareness. And, that's why meditation is becoming more popular. Why? Because at the root of meditation is you have to start to become aware. People avoid it because they don't want to become aware. It's like, I have a hard time meditating because my mind's a mess. Okay. And if you started to do it, it would be less of a mess. Does that sound fair? Yes, that sounds fair. Okay. But in that process, you're going to have to look at your thoughts. Well, I don't want to look at my thoughts. I don't really want to look at my thoughts. And then we don't do it. So it's an interesting thing. And meditation is like one of the best ones because people are like, yeah, I want the outcome of meditation and I want it to happen before I meditate. It's like, that's not how you get there.
I might be one of those. I might be one of those people that would say, I don't got time to meditate. Give me 2 minutes of meditation and I'm already like distracted and thinking about, I get it. Like to calm your spirit down, to calm your mind down, to calm your body down. That's a lot. But you're saying, learn how to do it. And it's like, whoa.
Well, think about it. Who are the best NFL quarterbacks in general? They're the ones that can stay poised in the chaos, right? Like the only way you learn how to do that is by recognizing the chaos and then yet becoming stable within it. And that's like a person with a clear mind is way more productive than a person that's getting distracted every second. You know what I mean? Wow. So say taking that 15 minutes down to be like, and visualize and see and actually see what's going on and bring that level down. It's like if the mind was like rough waters, it's like, whoa, you're going to get tossed around. But if you bring it to calm, still waters, what's the reflection even look like? You know, on a day where you go fishing in the morning and no one's out, and you go to cast that first line and nothing's moving, like what kind of reflection of the sky is on that water? It's perfect. It's recognizable. You can see it. But if boats are going through and, you know, kids are playing in it, like you can't have an accurate reflection. It's busy. And the same thing is true. Like you can navigate so much quicker and more efficient. We shouldn't even call it quicker, more efficiently when you have that quietness to yourself. So it actually is like a great metaphor for becoming more productive, because you actually can make sense of your mind.
I love that. One of the things that there was a phrase that our mutual friend Justin said to me that when I was like, all right, I gotta have a conversation with Dr. Bill about this. This is crazy. That the phrasing was something along the lines of getting your energy right, getting yourself right, getting your energy right. You start to have a life where it's not that life gets easy, but life has a better flow. The energy is things in life are coming to you. You're not having to reach out and grab so much. It doesn't feel forced. You're not having to force the issue. And I'm not saying it the way I want to say it right now. There was a phrase he used in there about redirecting your life, the life energy around you towards you. Am I saying that right?
Yeah, Justin loves to talk about me in the form of like alignment. You know, he likes to use that word to describe, like, Justin's a big fan of me. You know, and I think I'm working I'm working more step by step of bringing all things that I do into alignment to be like, this is Dr. Bill and this is what I offer the world. And it's, you know, from two aspects. Is there's a physical alignment piece to it, and then there's a spiritual, if you want to put it, to it. But that's aligning people with who they truly are. And it's like we think we know who we are, but most of what we know is actually like our negative ego type behavior. And when we operate from a place of like who we really are, it kind of looks like I like to use my daughter as the best example of, you know, when my daughter's almost 4 and we go camping a lot, and she likes to play in the dirt, but she also likes to wear a princess dress, and she likes to play with horses, but then she likes to paint her face with jewels and still play in the dirt with her horses and stuff. And no one is going to go tell her that that doesn't make sense. That doesn't fit together. You know what I mean? This is just her expression of herself in the way that she wants to express, regardless of what society, another individual or another person feels about her. And she's not doing it to like stick it to the man. I'm going to be this way because I've been suppressed in this way. No, she's just expressing the things of which she enjoys, and she's okay with it. And when we can be more like that, like, I like to do this over here, this brings me joy, and I'm finding joy and it's fulfilling my purpose. That looks a lot different than trying to fit into other people's boxes. You know, like through middle school and high school, many of us just try to fit into boxes. Like, I can't be a jock and also be a musician. Those things don't go together. I can't be good at grades, but then also be good at sports, because you know, maybe that's the gap has closed on that through many years. But, you know, there was these like I
can't be in the chess club and be prom king.
Yeah, exactly. I can't. Yeah, totally. Right. And that's kind of the thing. It's like, if you met our friend Vladimir, it's like, but how cool would it be now if you're like, yeah, I'm a chess champion. I run a business. I also love to go bike riding across the country, and I take a family vacation all this time. All the while, I also donate to this charity because it's near and dear to my heart because I went through this. Like, none of us look at that and be like, well, those things don't make sense. It's like, no, you know, we get signs beyond our mind of when we're going in the right direction and what really works for us. And when I say I look at my path of life and say I was a teacher, I was a chiropractor, now I'm a healer, they all make sense to me. They make sense to me. When I left education to go to chiropractic, I remember at the assembly when I was leaving, a woman came up to me and she was like, well, that has nothing to do with with teaching. And I remember I kind of was like, I can't wait to leave teaching. And my chiropractor was like, Bill, you're never going to be done teaching people. And I was like, oh, thanks. I learned that lesson then. I didn't have to look at it now and be like, wow, I thought I was going to be done with teaching. No, doctor means teacher, and I'm going to be teaching people about how amazing they are forever. Like, that's part of it, is like, I thought I was like broken and problematic. And the truth was, I just didn't understand the power within myself. And then that keeps unfolding. And my duty is to help remind people about that, in many different ways. Like, you aren't your past traumas, you aren't your like negative experience, you sure as hell aren't your attachments. You're so much more. And like, people forget that. And that isn't a mental journey back towards remembering that. That's like an energetic reminder. And through the path and the work that I do, that's kind of the process, is like, it's not all at once. You can't know everything about yourself tomorrow. That's not how the journey works, but you can know a little bit more. And as your life unfolds and you start to see the fruits and what starts to show up, then you learn a little bit more. And you can already see that on your journey, right? You're like, I got rid of this horrible thing that was like, I was giving so much time, energy, effort, and it was destroying my physical health. It was destroying my relationships. It was destroying my life. And then you're like, but I don't know what's going to be on the other side. And that's scary. And then you start to put it down, right? You start to put it down. And what are you finding out now? Do you like your fruits better?
Oh, way better. Way better. So the last thing, that could be a whole nother podcast episode just on that journey.
But it's important too. It's really like, and forever that will be you. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think that's one of the most important parts, is like, John, you wouldn't have changed until you didn't like your fruits enough. You hated them enough. You're like, this isn't what I showed up. This is not how life was going to be. And now you're like, every day isn't perfect, but you're more hopeful and your fruits are a little bit better each day. So you get signs.
I know my tomorrows can continually improve because of the direction I'm heading, even if every day that I'm living is not perfect. Yeah. And the path I was on before is every imperfect day brought about a coping, and it led to a worse tomorrow. And it's that whole topic is very deep. I think one of the things for those that are entrepreneurs that are listening in today, there's something I want them to take with them at the end here. And that is, you said the word pure earlier. You've not said this word, but it's come up through the way you communicate, and it's testimony or personal story, which carries with it a sincerity and a genuineness that you don't have to make up something for your audience, your market, your potential customer, because you're in business. Yeah. Dr. Bill Moss is still in business, even though he helps people.
Right.
And you're a successful business owner. So there's an attention to detail as far as marketing what you do. And I just can't help but think that part of your journey to become a more genuine version of yourself, but to then be able to use a testimony, an experience, and a story, that's got to be part of the marketing and getting your message out there and growing your client base. Surely.
It's, because like, do I fit the profile of somebody who would have a title of a spiritual guide? Not in the modern world in many ways. They wouldn't, we think like that's living upon a mountain and like, but us as Westerners, we aren't just looking to be more spiritual for spiritual sake. We aren't. We are looking to be more spiritual to understand how we fit into the world and how do we contribute to a greater good. And we want to like live into the world. So like, honestly, the tools that I started exploring for my own self, I wasn't interested in escaping. Like, there's many better ways to escape your life. So none of the tools were there to help me escape. They were there to help me live more fully into my experience so I can know who I am. And there's a big difference between that. Like, well, I'm going to go do this over here so I can escape the reality of my life right now for a brief moment, and then I can come back. And that's just not, that's the same thing as a drug. That's the same thing as an addiction, is like spiritual escapism. And what I'm finding is like there's many people want to know themselves on a deeper level without escaping their life. They actually want to have a greater life and know themselves to a greater degree. And personally, I hadn't found a better way, and I do one if I did find it. And that's why I keep going in this way, because I'm motivated by the fruits for other people. Because you said something when we were describing alignment, and you were talking about me as a marketer, is the way our ability to know when people are genuine and authentic, I believe, has changed drastically in the last 25, 30 years. You know, we think of like ideas of somebody being psychic is like this weird out there thing, but more often than not, now we know just the knowingness of when somebody's being true and honest and when they're not, much quicker, especially in the presence. So it's that much more important now if we're trying to be in alignment with who we are. So to market something that's not true, it's like, you can even feel it if you're like, we've all done this as business owners. Like we've said something or done a sales tactic because somebody told us to do it. And we're like, that didn't really feel really congruent. And then you practice it enough and maybe it becomes like part of you. But then in the back of your mind, you're like, that just never felt right when you change it. So it matters, right? And more selling, if you will, has become much more of like having some of a system on how to communicate with people in John's way, in Bill's way, in whoever's way, not to just say what I say because that's going to work, right?
Rather than try to persuade every prospect I sit with to do business with me, why don't I create a system where through being very true to what my mission is and what I'm trying to accomplish, I attract the people. I'm doing business with people who believe what I believe.
Yeah,
in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Because maybe my mission serves their purpose and our beliefs are in alignment.
Yeah, right.
And so when they're in alignment, doing business together is easy.
Correct. And interestingly enough, we say in like spiritual teaching that in the spiritual world, if you will, like in an energetic world, let's say to some degree, like really attracts like, but in the physical world, opposites attract, you know, so you have this opposites coming together. But then, you know, when your energy changes, you tend to repel people that are like of lower states and attract people of kind of upper states in the simplest form, if you will. So, you know, what does that mean for your sales? What does that mean for like, especially a service-based, you know, I would consider you service-based.
Right.
What does that say to your clients? Like, you know, you're helping them bring them up to a higher state, and then you are also trying to achieve a higher state too. So it's really a healthier way to help people move out of the current state that they're in, because that's how problems really get solved. Not just like, tied off the problem, solved it. It's like you move out of problems, right? You've seen that at different phases of your business where it's like you're working. Whoop, all of a sudden we moved out of it. Those aren't our problems anymore. You know, you got bigger problems, or new problems. You just moved to a new level. You just moved out of the energy. You didn't solve all the low level problems. You just, that's not as big of a deal. You know what I mean?
Sometimes you don't even have to solve the problem. You just moved away from it.
You did. That's exactly right.
You elevated above it.
Yeah. And that's a lot of times when people say in business, like, you want new problems. Well, what does that mean? Well, you want to move out of the little mundane ones that maybe you've been working on at the first year of your business, and then you have bigger ones. It's like employees weren't as big of a deal when I only had a couple of them, and then I grew and had more of them, and they become a bigger deal, right? So like that's a new challenge, problem, reward, all in one, and then you move and you grow again. So it's not so simple as like, well, we solved all the problems, now there aren't any at this level. It's like you get the right people, you move above. And we do that in our own life all the time, where it's like, oh, you were worried about this conversation that you had when you're in high school with this person. And like, do you remember any of those like like interactions anymore? We don't do that. We move out.
Crazy to think that I operate probably off of more scar tissue where I can't remember how I got the scar.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Wow.
That's 100% true. Yeah, that would be accurate.
Hey, from everything we talked about today, there's probably something that is a favorite or a thing worth elaborating on, or a thing worth leaving the audience with.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up, I don't know what your closing thoughts would be because we kind of hit a few different topics, but I was over here feverishly taking notes, which is great.
Well, I think it's actually ties back to one thing you said, and it's one of the core values of my company. And I heard this years ago when I worked with another coaching organization when I was in practice at somebody else's office, was the idea of the way you do anything is the way you do everything. And I think that statement, sometimes it rubs people the wrong way because they're like, well, no, I'm really good at this when I do it over here, but I'm not. But it's much deeper than that. And what it actually says is, it gives you hope. That means that when you take time to work on yourself and maybe take inventory of your thought, you're not just taking inventory of your own thoughts in that moment. You're actually, the way you're doing it there is going to affect everything in your life. Like, you're going to become more balanced. When you start to work on yourself, you start to work outside of yourself on the world, and the world sees that, right? That's what starts to show up differently. So it's not like, oh, I'm going to miss out in the world if I take time or take a break or look inside and go internally and release things and release emotion or get to know myself better. You're actually going to create a better exterior world for yourself. So I think that statement applies so many different ways that is hopeful, because also when you clean up your physical space, what starts to happen inside? You start to feel different too. So it's like, whenever you start to make a positive change in your life, it can and will show up everywhere. So I think it's a good statement to end on, because it gives people hope. And it also shows how powerful you really are, which people forget all the time.
Wow. Dr. Bill Moss, thank you so much for being on today, being an amazing guest. If you're up for it, I feel like maybe a part two. Cool. I think having you as a repeat would be awesome. Thank you so much again for being on.
You got it. Thank you for having me, John. And I look forward to doing it again.